Welcome to Crying Out to God online prayer meeting December 14th, 2022. We hope that you will be blessed by the broadcast ministry this evening as our service is pre-recorded. Please take the time to share the joy with someone else. If you are viewing from YouTube or Facebook, go ahead and press that share button this evening, and God will indeed bless you. Thank you for watching.
My name's Eunice, and I hail from Papua New Guinea, and I've been living in Australia for 35 years now. But while I was in New Guinea, I met this wonderful man, Peter, and we have 3 children and 9 grandchildren. I was very active in the church, and I realized after 3 years that I needed more to life than what I was going through. I was called to do literature ministry, which means that I went from door to door selling Christian literature. Then I felt a calling to the households of faith. What I mean by households of faith is that we are doing church in the home. In our Discovery Bible readings, our group found that we were able to have open and honest discussions, ask questions, and try to find the answers from what we were reading. And you didn't have to have a Bible knowledge or spend so many years in the church in order to participate in a discussion.
I didn't go to church. It wasn't something that was really part of my lifestyle.
My background is Catholic, and then decided to leave the church when I left home and more or less have said no to all religion. Up until I met up with Eunice. She was telling me about her household of faith that she's holding at her home. I brought John along with me, and it was very different to what I expected. And I felt very comfortable in her home, and the way that they conducted it, it was nice.
There's a lot of teaching and learning within the stories and the morals. That's what I'm interested in. There's got a lot of good learning there.
I started looking for God a few years ago. I was searching everywhere for the right church. I found Seventh-day Adventist Church, and then I reached out to Eunice, and then she invited me to the home group church. Yeah, it's been amazing. Amazing for my spiritual growth.
Rochelle is my niece. She's very responsible, very reliable, and has a real deep passion for the Word of God.
Households of Faith to me at first was a really awesome idea. I wanted to have connection with people. Yeah, getting deep into the Word. But I also wanted to be able to make friends and really feel like I was part of a family.
Doing life on your own is too hard today. But doing life with a group who supports you and who prays for you is just wonderful. It's worth anything. It's worth all the hard work. It's worth all the preparation. It's worth every bit of effort that I put into it.
I'm really looking forward to that time when I can open my home up to others, because I want to be able to see the change in how
I want to be a witness to see how Jesus changes people's lives. He's done for me.
Ancient scribes, sacred scrolls, hidden in desert caves, discovered by Bedouin shepherds nearly 2,000 years later. Who wrote them? Why were they hidden? And what vital message do they have for us today?
Okay, here we are in the room with the big letter E on the door. I know one E thing about this room. It's empty.
Being healthy means you're supposed to be empty?
No, that can't be it. Hey, look, there's an arrow on the floor. It's pointing to that arrow over there.
Yeah, and that arrow over there is pointing to another one over by the wall. There are arrows all over this room. Think we should follow them? Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Anyone know where we're going?
Yes, to the next arrow.
In other words, we're going nowhere. This is boring.
Maybe we should walk faster.
Fine with me.
Now we're going nowhere faster.
Maybe we should run?
Okay, here we go.
Now we're going nowhere a lot faster.
Hey, Erica! See if TNB knows why we're running around in an empty room like a bunch of bats flying around in an empty cave.
Okay, TNB. Why are we running around in an empty room like a bunch of bats flying around in an empty cave?
What is happening to you?
What's happening to me? Well, I'm getting tired.
What else?
I'm breathing hard, and my heart is pumping like mad.
And I'm beginning to sweat. I don't like to sweat. Very unladylike.
What is happening to you?
Well, I'm running, I'm walking, I'm breathing hard, I'm...
E. It begins with E. We're what?
Hold it! Oh, sorry, but I think I have the answer.
What is it?
Running, walking, getting out of breath, sweating. What are we doing? Playing soccer? No, we're exercising. That's what the E is for. Exercise.
Bill, you're a genius. That's the lesson of the arrows and this room. To be healthy, we walk, we run, we sweat, we exercise.
Exercise will keep you healthy. Exercise will make you strong. Exercise will fight off diseases. Exercise will help you live long. Exercise is good for your body. Exercise is good for your mind. In all things,
Earlier on Codex Sinaiticus.
What's surprising about the Codex Sinaiticus is that it is so thin and the sheets are so even. With a caliper, they measure between 1/4 and 1/10 of a millimeter.
It was this manuscript Konstantin von Tischendorf discovered at St. Catherine's Monastery.
Tischendorf is the first in history to dedicate his life to the active search for ancient manuscripts of the Bible.
And now, part 3 of Codex Sinaiticus.
So Tischendorf was in active search for ancient manuscripts, and in 1844 he came to the monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai. He was granted access to search in the large library of the monastery, and they searched for really old manuscripts from the time of the Roman Empire. What happened next is hard to tell, because now the story splits into 2 versions. One version follows the diary of Tischendorf, who relates the story in this way. As he exited the library, he noticed a large basket. The basket contained sheets of old manuscripts. He noticed that these were ancient manuscripts of great interest to him. He was horrified to see the basket next to a large kiln in the monastery. He got the impression that the monks had been using old manuscripts from the library to light the fire in cold weather or when they were baking bread. In his diary, Tischendorf portrays himself as the one who saved the manuscript from further destruction and persuaded the monks to stop using ancient manuscripts to light their fires. He returns on 2 occasions. On his 3rd visit in 1859, one of the monks shows him the rest of the manuscript from which the first sheets were taken. That was Codex Sinaiticus. Tischendorf becomes so elated at seeing the Codex that he spends the entire night turning the pages and reading the manuscript, which he understands is the oldest manuscript of the New Testament text he has ever seen. The experience is so moving that he later writes, "To sleep would have felt like a crime. It would have been totally wrong to sleep." So he remained awake the entire night to examine the manuscript. So one variant of the story says that Tischendorf is the one who saved the document. The other variant comes from the monks in St. Catherine's Monastery. The monks who live there today want to defend their forefathers. Forefathers is perhaps the wrong word to use when speaking of monks in a monastery, but they speak on behalf of the monks living at the monastery in the 1800s when Tischendorf visited. What the monks say is unequivocal. They felt beguiled by Tischendorf. They even have a handwritten letter supposedly signed by Tischendorf himself. In the letter, he concedes that the monastery is the owner of the manuscript, that he may take it with him on a loan, and where he promises to return the manuscript, which has never happened.
This is where the history gets very complicated. The community drew up an agreement with Konstantin Tischendorf. He was given this manuscript on a loan, and it was to be returned to the manuscripts after the publication of the text. And Konstantin Tischendorf gave a personal letter where he reflected this same language. He was taking this as a loan. He promised it to return it to the monastery at the monastery's first request. In 1862, when it was published, it was the oldest Bible known, and so it became sensational. And the Minister of Education in Russia pointed out that they were obligated to return the manuscript. But it was Konstantin Tischendorf and also the Emperor of Russia who said, perhaps other avenues will present themselves. And so they began a negotiation. And the story is that the monastery depended very much on the income that it received from the properties and gifts that had been donated to the monastery in Russia and the Ukraine at that time. And the Russians impounded these income, and they said, we will not restore them until you sign over the codex. So the monastery did sign over the codex, but this agreement was achieved under constraints. That is where the story of the Codex Sinaiticus gets very, very complicated. In 1933, when Stalin was desperate for funds, he sold it to England, and they purchased it for the price of £100,000, a colossal sum of money at that time. So today, if you go to the British Library, you see the Codex Sinaiticus and the Codex Alexandrinus. They're always displayed next to each other as the great treasures of the scriptures from the early church.
Now, the manuscript was split between 4 different libraries. Many scholars wished for international collaboration to reunite the entire manuscript and make it available in digital form. However, that kind of collaboration would be difficult to accomplish.
The Archbishop was first approached in 2002. Would the monastery be willing to collaborate with the British Library, the University of Leipzig, and the State Library of St. Petersburg to conserve all the existing leaves and fragments and to photograph them, and then for the first time there would be a facsimile of all the existing leaves and fragments. And at first the Archbishop was very reticent. He thought, how is that possible? And so he dictated an icy letter of response. Given our differences over this manuscript, any thought of collaboration is out of the question.
With this brusque rejection from the Archbishop of Sinai, the initiative for collaboration would have died completely had it not been for the work of a person who thought it had to be possible to find a different solution.
Introducing Ministry Spotlight. Tonight's Ministry Spotlight is on Reconnecting Ministries. Welcome to a ministry that has amazing potential for revitalizing the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Statistics tell us that over 1 million former or inactive Seventh-day Adventists are not in a local congregation, somewhere in the North American division. Just think about the blessings and what it would mean if all these people came back. There's a story about one such member who grew up Adventist and attended church regularly as a child and teen. But then she went through some troubled times and decided to take a weekend off from church. I just need to pull things together and let life simmer down, she thought. Well, 1 week turned into 10 weeks, and 10 weeks turned into a decade away. Then one day the Holy Spirit spoke to her heart and convicted her that she needed to get back to church. So, the next Sabbath, she did just that. She drove into the church parking lot and found a place to park, but she couldn't get out of her car. No, the car doors worked just fine. It was fear and guilt that gripped her. The evil one was working overtime at that moment. You know where you've been and what you've been doing. What makes you think you deserve to be in that sanctuary with all those perfect people? He was whispering in her ear. She pulled out her Bible and prayed while still in her car. Then she started the engine and drove away, not going into the church that day. This happened several more times before she confided to a friend about her experiences. And the next week, the two of them went in together to worship God and enjoyed the welcome home this inactive member craved. Makes you think, how many more people who once worshiped in an Adventist congregation somewhere in the past are sitting in parking lots of the 6,000 Seventh-day Adventist churches in North America each Sabbath? According to data research by the Center for Creative Ministry, about 90% of Adventists who leave the church claim one or more of the following 3 reasons. Number 1, they experience conflict with another church member or the pastor, usually in matters other than doctrine. Number 2, they perceive that the church does not care about them or their needs. Number 3, they display a growing disinterest in spiritual things due to the lack of understanding about the gospel, which connects them first and foremost to Christ. Inactive members are 3 times more likely to be divorced and remarried than active members, and 4 times more likely to be divorced and single. According to survey data, being single in the Adventist church is not easy. Many singles leave because of unfulfilled needs, not theological differences. One former member said, quote, "The Adventist church has the best theology out there, but that's not enough," unquote. Reconnecting Ministries highlights the hurting, inactive, and former members in the Seventh-day Adventist Church by looking to Jesus to build through prayer and faith-based strategies a way for these former church family members to gain hope and courage for victory. Team members who are a part of this ministry will be provided training on a quarterly basis. If you feel moved to be a part of this much-needed ministry, do not hesitate and take a picture of the QR code and sign up. Or get in touch with your pastor or your local personal ministry leaders today and say, "I will go," and be a part of God's reconnecting ministry team.
miles away from the nearest continent, there's a lazy, laid-back land where the days are long and time slows down. Just like a tired sea turtle resting on a white sandy beach. A place where the minutes feel like hours and the hours can feel like days. A relaxing respite where you can pause from the hustle and bustle of life and just be in the moment. The locals call it Fiji time. It simply means that nothing happens in a hurry and that whatever is supposed to happen will eventually happen. So relax and enjoy the wait. But it's more than just the way the locals view time. It's the way they do life.
Father up above.
To be honest, even though I grew up on an island, many times I find it difficult to slow down. There's just so much to do and so little time in which to do it. And I know that many task-oriented people like me can relate. But once you've experienced Fiji or island time for yourself, you begin to realize that you've been missing out on something so essential in life. Because the reality is that the quality of your life increases in proportion to your quality of rest.
To turn around and fight back today, we call for we could stop the fighting.
Today we live in a world full of appointments, schedules, deadlines, and cutoff dates. Life is crowded with so much activity, assignments, and engagements. There are so many things fighting for our attention and pulling us in so many different directions. We live in a task-oriented world that seems to be more concerned with production rather than people. And in this fast-paced society, filled with sound bites and flashing lights, sometimes we find it hard to even breathe. It's so easy to get caught up in trying to make a living that we never really live. Many people come to the end of their lives, filled with regret, realizing that their years have been consumed with things that don't really matter. There are few things worse than coming to the end of your days, wishing you had more time to live in the moment. But here's the good news. In this world that is constantly on the grind, God is offering to us Fiji time. Time to trade in the mess of our stress for the best of God's rest. Time to decompress from the pressures of life. Time to enjoy this precious gift of God called the present. To be in the here and in the now. To live in the moment. And while it is true that in the light of the last days, we're to live with a sense of urgency, it is also true that God is calling us to be still and to know that He is God.
So much closer, closer than it seems.
You see, we are called human beings, not human doings. And most people get so caught up in constantly doing that they forget to simply be. Friends, if the enemy cannot make you bad, he will make you busy. He will crowd your life with so much clutter that you will have no time to spend with the one who inhabits eternity. And without Him, life is a never-ending pursuit of happiness that will eventually lead to devastation, disappointment, and death. And so, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Are you overwhelmed by the stresses of life? Do you feel yourself drowning in a sea of activity, burdened in a beehive of busyness, wrapped up in a web of weariness? Well, if so, the God of rest says to you today, "Come unto me, all ye that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. For in returning and in rest you shall be saved. In quietness and confidence you shall find your strength." And as we come to lay down our burdens at the feet of Jesus and learn to live more of our lives on Fiji time, the God of peace shall give us rest for the rest of our journey. Rest not only for time, but for all eternity.
No more senseless dying. Jesus